and welcome. We also have somewhere on Zoom, I believe, the congregation. A small number of people who are here can also be seen. And all of the Zoom sound goes through the PA system, so everyone in the congregation can hear people on Zoom. And we have the Jewish home following as well. And we are using the Reconstructionist Machzor, and the Jewish home has its own Machzor. So if you hear different page numbers at times, that's why. Page 23. Okay, while we're doing that, this is simple enough. I'm going to start with a song which came to my mind as I was coming here. It's, Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. That's easy enough. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are born and reborn again. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. On page 23, and it's on your screen. Let's read this responsively. This night, as the new year begins, we come together as a community, yet each of us is strangely solitary. Each of us bears our own worries and concerns. Each of us has a story no one else can tell. Each of us brings praise no one else can offer. Each of us feels joy no one else can share. Each of us has regrets that others cannot know. And so, at this sacred time we pray, if we are weary, may we find strength. If we are discouraged, may we find hope. If we have forgotten how to share, may we teach each other and learn together. And if we have been careless with one another, may we seek forgiveness. If our hearts have been chilled by indifference, may we be warmed by renewed purpose, inspired by the spirit of this holy night. Page 27 and 28 for candle lighting. Jenny Kornfeld and Stu Kranzel. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. Blessed are you, source of light, our God, the sovereign of all worlds, who has made us holy with your mitzvot and commanded us to kindle the festival light. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, the sovereign of all worlds, who gave us life and kept us strong and brought us to this time. And page 57 and 58. Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah. Amen. Be'alma divrach iruteh ve'yamlich malchuteh b'chayechon uvyomechon ufchayedechon Beit Yisrael Bagalav Izman Kadriv Vimro Amen Yesh Me Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Molol Me'al Maya Yitvarach Yitvarach Vishtabach Vitpah Vitromam Ve'yitnasem Ve'yitadar Ve'yitaleh Ve'yithalal Shemei Kodeshah Berechom Leila Uleila Mikol Birchata V'shirata Tosh Bechata V'nechemata De'amiran Be'alma V'maru Amen. We rise for the Baruch Hu, the call to prayer. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. We continue on page 61 and 62, or the Jewish home on page 4, with the first blessing before the Shema about God in the midst of creation. Blessed are you, eternal one, our God, sovereign of all worlds, by whose word the evenings fall. In wisdom you open heaven's gates. With divine discernment you make seasons change, causing times to come and go, and ordering the stars on their appointed paths through heaven's dome, all according to your will. Creator of the day and night, you roll back light before the dark, and dark before the light. Page 63. 65. You make the day pass away and bring a night, dividing between day and night. Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uven laila. Adonai tzavot shemo, El chai v'kayam tamidim lo, aleinu leolam vahed. Baruch atah Adonai, ma'arif aharavim. Blessed are you, Almighty One, who makes the evenings fall. On page 71, or at the Jewish home, page 5, a blessing about the giving of Torah as an act of love. With everlasting love, you love the house of Israel. Torah and mitzvot, laws and justice you have taught us. And so, dear one, our God, when we lie down and when we rise, we reflect upon your laws. We take pleasure in your Torah's words and in your mitzvot now and always. Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael amcha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadeta. Al ken Adonai Eloheinu b'shachbeinu u'kumeinu nasiach b'chokecha v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha u'v'mitzvotecha le'olam vahed. For truly the mitzvot are our life, our length of days. On them we meditate by day and night. Ki hem chayeinu ve'yorech yameinu uvahem nege yomam v'layla. Ki hem chayeinu ve'yorech yameinu uvahem nege yomam v'layla. Ki hem chayeinu ve'yorech yameinu uvahem nege yomam v'layla. Ki hem chayeinu ve'yorech yameinu uvahem nege yomam v'layla. Page 73 and 74. Your love will never depart from us as long as worlds endures. V'ahavatcha lo tasor mimenu le'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Page 76. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Listen up, Israel. Adonai is our God. Adonai is one. Together, page 76. Yahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha u'lechtecha b'derech u'shachbecha u'kumecha Ukshatam le'ohot al yadecha, v'hayu l'totafot b'eineinecha, u'kavtam al mezuzot beitecha, u'visharecha. And we continue on page 81 and at the Jewish home on page 181 with what I call Parshat Climate Change. If you truly listen to my bidding as I bid you now, loving the fount of life, your God, and serving God with all your heart, with every breath, then I will give you rain upon your land in its appointed time, the early rain and later rain, so you may gather in your corn, your wine, and oil. And I will give you grass upon your field to feed your animals, and you will eat and be content. Beware then, lest your heart be led astray, and you go off and worship other gods, and you submit to them, so that the anger of the mighty one should burn against you, and seal up the heavens so no rain would fall, so that the ground would not give forth your produce, and you be forced to leave the good land I am giving you. So place these words upon your heart into your life breath. Bind them as a sign upon your hand, and let them rest before your eyes. Teach them to your children, speaking of them when you sit at home and when you walk upon the road, when you lie down and when you rise. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, so that your days and your children's days be many on the land the faithful one promised to give your ancestors, as long as heaven rests above the earth. למען ירבו ימיכם וימי בניכם על האדמה אשר נשבע אדוני לאבותיכם לתת להם כימי השמיים על הארץ. Page 84. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור. The boundless one told Moses, saying, speak to the Israelites. Tell them to make themselves tzitzit, fringes upon the corners of their clothes throughout their generations. Have them place upon the corner tzitzit, fringe, a twine of royal blue. This is your tzitzit, fringe. Look at it and remember all the mitzvot of the Eternal One, and do them so you won't go off after the lusts of your heart or after what catches your eye, so that you remember to do all my mitzvot and be holy for your God. I am the faithful one, your God, who brought you from Mitzrayim, from Egypt, for you to be for you a God. I am Adonai, your God. Adonai Elohechem Emet. Ve'emunah kol zot v'kayam aleinu, ki hu Adonai Eloheinu v'ein zulato. Page 85. Our faith and truth rest on all this which is binding upon us, that the boundless one alone is our divinity, that no divinity exists but one, and that we are Israel, community of God, that it is God who saves us from the hand of governments, the very palm of tyrants, who enacts great deeds without measure and wondrous deeds beyond all count, who puts our souls amid the living, and who keeps our feet from giving way, who breaks apart the schemes of those who hate us, confounds the thoughts of any bearing us ill will, that it is God who made miracles for us in Egypt, signs and wonders in Ham's children's land. From one generation to the next, God is our guarantor, and even on a day that turned to night, God stayed with us when death's deep shadow fell. And even in our age of orphans and survivors, God's loving acts have not abandoned us, and God has brought together our scattered kin from the distant corners of the earth. As then, so now, God brings the people forth from every place of menace to lasting freedom. Page 88 at the bottom. Or zaruach lahatzahadik u'leyishrei lehev simcha. Or zaruach lahatzahadik u'leyishrei lehev simcha. Light is strewn for the righteous, u'leyishrei lev simcha, and for the happiness of the upright. Simchu tzadikim badonai v'hodu lezecher kadsho. Celebrate, the righteous celebrate in God and give thanks to the memory of God's name. Simchu tzadikim b'Adonai, v'hodu lezecher kadsho. Simchu tzadikim b'Adonai, v'hodu lezecher kadsho. Adonai brought the Israelites through a divided sea of reeds. There they beheld divine might. They praised and thanked the name and willingly accepted for themselves God's rule. Page 89. Moses, Miriam, and all the Israelites broke out in song, abundant in their joy. All as one said, as do we. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh, nora tehilot osef eleh, malchutecha ra'u vanecha, bokei hayam lifnei Moshe, Zeli anu ve'amru Adonai imloch li'olam va'ed v'nehemar ki vada Adonai et Yaakov ugalo mi'ad chazak mimenu baruch Ata Adonai, God Yisrael. Blessed are you, Adonai, Israel's redeeming power. Wherever we are, let us say together, page 91, help us lie down, dear one, our God, in peace, and let us rise again, our sovereign, to life. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Decree for us a worthy daily lot, and redeem us for the sake of your great name, and enfold us in the wings of your protection, for you are our redeeming guardian. Truly a sovereign, gracious and compassionate God are you. Guard our going forth each day for life and peace, now and always. Spread over us the shelter of your peace, the sukkah of your peace. Blessed are you, compassionate one, who spreads your sukkah of peace over all your people Israel and over Jerusalem. Ufros aleinu sukkot shlomecha baruch atah Adonai hapores sukkot shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. Page 97 and 98. And at the Jewish home, page 8, the signature piece from Psalms, the biblical signature piece for Rosh Hashanah. Blast piercing notes upon the shofar for the new moon, for the full moon for our festive holiday, for it is Israel's law, a statute of the God of Jacob. Tiku b'chodesh shofar b'kesem leyom chagenu ki chok leYisrael hu mishpat leElohei Yaakov. Page 99, we again reach the Chatzi Kaddish, which divides between different parts of the service. As we recite the Chatzi Kaddish, we are preparing for the Amidah. We're preparing for the Amidah. La'amod means to stand. The Amidah is a prayer said standing, facing eastwards towards Jerusalem. It is recited at the times when the sacrifices would be offered in Jerusalem. The sacrifices, our words stand in place of the sacrifices. The Amidah tonight will be recited silently, is pages 103 to 126, 103 to 126. Tonight we recite the Amidah silently. Tomorrow we will be reciting the Amidah aloud. We prepare for the Amidah as we recite the Kaddish. Page 100. Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Amen. Me'alma divrach erotei, ve'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon, uchayei dechol, Beit Yisrael, Bagala, uvizman karev, v'meru, amen. Yehi shmei Rabbam mevorach, le'olam ulol me'almaya, yitbarach, yitbarach, v'ishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitromam, v'yitnaseh, v'yihadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, shemei de Kaddish ha-brechu, le'elah u'le'elah mikol birchata v'shirata toshbechata v'nechemata ve'amiran ve'alma v'immeru. Amen. Page 103 through 108, and then 111 through 126. At the Jewish Home, page 10 through 19. Page 124. At the Jewish home, page 18. בספר חיים ברכה ושלום ופרנסה טובה נזכר ונכתב לפניך אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל לחיים טובים ולשלום. In the book of life, blessing, peace, and proper sustenance, may we be remembered and inscribed, we and all your people, the house of Israel, for a good life and for peace. Yes, in our prayers, we'll be saying that a lot. May we be written in the book of life for the coming year until the end of Yom Kippur, when we say, may we be sealed in the book of life for the coming year. It's as if there is a book up in heaven and God is deciding at the beginning of this year on the day of judgment who's to be written in the book of life and who's to be written in the book of not so much life. Of course, liturgy is not theology. Just keep that in mind. Prayers are not dogma. Prayers are poetry. And as I'll say a little more later, these words are meant to move us as poetry does. In the book of life, blessing, peace, and proper sustenance, may we be remembered and inscribed, we and all your people, the house of Israel, for good life and for peace. Baruch atah Adonai, oseh hashalom. Blessed are you, compassionate one, maker of peace. Together, wherever we are on page 125, dear God, protect my tongue from evil and my lips from telling lies. May I turn away from evil and do what is good in your sight. Let me be counted among those who seek peace. May my words of prayer and my heart's meditation be seen favorably, beloved one, my rock and my redeemer. May the one who creates harmony above make peace for us and for all Israel and for all who dwell on earth. And we say, Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'emru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, V'imru amen. Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu v'al kol yoshvei tevel. V'imru amen. Page 480. 480 more or less. That is to say, we'll now say Misha Berach based somewhat on the texts that are there. Misha Berach, a prayer for those who are dealing with illness or are in need of support, those in our hearts, in our lives, in our community, in our congregation, in our families, You have a list somewhere. Which I had before the service started. Yes. A partial list here. As a congregation, we're thinking of David and Sonny Press, of all those dealing with COVID, of Jana Kelly and the staff of LaSalle General Hospital as they battle COVID, Dora Nelson, Richard Avis, Honey Avis, Alvin Ben, Jill Hirsch, Stu Kranzel, Charlotte Weiss. There are others. Are there people on Zoom who want to add some names?
Robert Kushner, Robbie Janney, Abba Cole.
These and others in our hearts, in our minds, and in our lives. Misheberach Avotenu Abraham Yitzhak Yaakov Vimotenu Saref Karachav Aleam Hu Yivarech Kilat HaKodesh Azot Im Kol Kilot HaKodesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yivarech v'yirapeh et hafalin shebetochenu U'yachyahem v'yishmerehem mikol tzara v'tzuka mikol nega v'machala v'yishlach bracha v'atzlacha v'kol ma'aseh yadehem v'yishlach lahem refuah shlema refuat hanefesh refuat haguf v'nomar amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless this community along with other holy communities, and send blessing and healing to those amongst us, to those who are in need of support and are dealing with illness. May the Holy Blessed One send them a complete healing, a healing of body and a healing of soul, speedily and soon and in our day, along with all the sick of Israel and of all the world. And let us say, Amen. We say together, next page. Mi sheberach avotenu mekor habracha limotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Page 1196. יתגדל ויקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברי חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחיי חיים ומכון, ובחיי דרכו בישראל, בגלה בזמן קריב יאמרו, אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם עולמי עלמיא, יתברך, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתמם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי לקודשא ברכו, לעילא לעילא מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תשבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בימה ויאמרו, אמן. יתקבל צלותון ובאותון דכל בישראל, קדמה והונדי ושמיא ויאמרו, אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיא, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו, אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום, עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל, ויאמרו, Amen. Shana Tova. Let me be the first to welcome you to 5782. The year 5782. Rosh Hashanah is certainly early in September this year. In fact, I cannot remember Rosh Hashanah ever falling on Labor Day. Can anyone else? For me, this confluence of observances mixes two otherwise distinct elements of my life, Labor Day and Rosh Hashanah. Although when one thinks about it, there is a clear connection that can be made between the two. Labor Day for me is not simply a weekend that marks the cultural end of summer in America. In the town where I grew up, Labor Day was and is a major community celebration, really the biggest civic celebration of the year, far outranking any of the other holidays on the national civic calendar, including the 4th of July. Rosh Hashanah, on the other hand, was almost always at least a couple weeks later, and in my experience, has been a separate observance centered around the synagogue. The town I grew up in, Greenbelt, Maryland, was a planned community built out of the New Deal, so a lot of its history is connected to the events of the Great Depression and all of the social issues that came out of that. So Labor Day was and is in Greenbelt, where I grew up, a long weekend of celebration from Thursday through Monday, jam-packed with activities that take over the entire town because what Labor Day is celebrating is a large part of the town's history. There is a carnival that occupies the center of town throughout the entire time, with rides and games and booths set up by various community organizations from which you can tell what's going on in the town. There are art displays and photography contests, athletic competitions, a book sale of used donated books run by the elementary school PTA when it's not time during COVID, various numbers of cultural events, and on Monday morning of Labor Day, there is a long parade through town that lasts a couple hours and attracts the attention of the entire region. Every year, someone is honored as Outstanding Citizen of the Year, and on many years there is or has been a special celebration of labor, reminding people what Labor Day really is about. Labor Day, after all, is about real issues of justice and injustice, equity and inequity in society, citizenship, service, and responsibility. Most people these days, it seems to me, don't stop to think much about what Labor Day means at all. It's a 3-day weekend when a lot of merchandise is on sale. Maybe it's a last chance for a backyard cookout before the end of summer, or in some places an excuse for more fireworks. It comes across as a casually celebratory day commemorating nothing in particular. But in all of this, Labor Day masks a sordid story of oppression in American life and history. And there is where one can begin to see the connection between Labor Day and the issues that inform Rosh Hashanah, even though, even in my own life, I never made the connection between the Labor Day festival taking place in the center of town and the Rosh Hashanah observances that usually took place weeks later in the synagogue a few blocks away. We don't have time tonight to go into the details of the dark history behind what leads to Labor Day. But we all need to know how an economic system which developed in this country, along with the rise of mechanized industry and mass production, stripped away the life, health, and dignity, literally the ability to live, for a large bulk of the people in America. Eventually, the pain inflicted on a huge subclass of the American people was met with large, violent protests in which people literally died in the streets of American cities as they were calling for such radical ideas as safety standards for workplaces and radical measures as an 8-hour workday and 40-hour week. One incident which stands out as a significant part of American Jewish history is also a large part of this American history. That event is the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire of 1911. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire of 1911, where after years of protests, strikes, and advocacy for safer conditions in the textile sweatshops of New York, a fire broke out in an upper floor of a building housing one of those sweatshops. 146 workers, mostly young immigrant Jewish women, died in that fire or from jumping from the 9th floor to get away from that fire, once it became apparent that the doors they needed to open to get off the floor were locked. While the owners themselves, who were on the floor above the workers and were not locked into their offices, were able to escape to the roof and to the safety of the building next door. In terms of the loss of human life, this was the single largest building catastrophe in the entire history of New York City until 9/11, the 20th anniversary of which is also commemorated this week. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire was a significant event in American Jewish history because so many people among the victims and among the owners were Jewish. It is part of our story in America. It is a significant event in American history in general because it did in fact lead to the enactment of some labor reforms. And as is also often the case, someone without power had to die before those with the power to change the situation paid attention. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire is also important because it is largely forgotten, and because there are powerful interests in this country who admire the economic principles that led to the conditions in that factory. And the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire is important for us to remember because sweatshops continue to exist today in this country and outside. In so many ways, Rosh Hashanah is about what we are trying to make of our world today, what we are trying to make of our lives today. Issues of justice and human dignity are key to the meaning of the day. On Rosh Hashanah, we take stock of our lives, where we have been, where we are, and where we are going. That is why Rosh Hashanah is known by several other names than Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, Rosh is head, Hashanah of the year, head of the year, but Rosh Hashanah is also known as Yom HaZikaron, day of remembrance, because we remember and God remembers where we have been, what we have done, and what we have promised each other. And we pray that God remembers the covenant that God made with our ancestors, Rosh Hashanah is known as Yom Hadin, Judgment Day, the Day of Judgment, because we evaluate where we have been and what we have done in light of what we have promised each other. We sometimes talk about Judgment Day as coming at the end of history, yet our tradition places Judgment Day at the end of each year, so that we can live through it and try to straighten out our lives before the end of time. And Yom HaTruah, the day of the blowing of the horn, because on this day we strive to wake up and call attention to where we are and where we are going in light of our commitments to each other. We do this for ourselves as individuals, and also we do this for ourselves as members of all circles we are a part of our family, part of our community, part of our Jewish people, part of the larger society and the world, hence a concern about Labor Day. Where have we been? Where are we now? Where are we going? Each of us brings our own individual work, our individual curriculum to this task on these days, in direct connection to what is going on in our personal, individual, and family lives. And we use the text of the prayers as mirrors held up to our souls, so that we can reflect on these questions and our personal situations. And we use the energy of the community around us to propel us forward in our task. Each of us also brings to this task, in our own way, a curriculum drawn by the events in the life of our community and our society. Although we each may evaluate a bit differently what is going on in the world, it does bear asking the question together: where are we at the turn of this year as we enter the year 5782? I sense too that the question should be asked collectively, because I have this feeling, perhaps a lot of us do, that at this point in history, we are at a turning point. Predictions are always difficult to make, especially, as they say, when it comes to predicting the future. But I'm not talking about describing a future in any great detail. Rather, I'm suggesting examining the present and asking, where are we going if we continue to go in the direction that we are going? After all, that is the question the prophets of the Hebrew Bible were examining. The prophets of the Hebrew Bible were not saying definitively what was going to happen. They were saying, if we as a people continue doing such and such into the future, doing the things that we are currently doing, this is what is likely to happen. And although I am certainly not a prophet, I am feeling very much like we are at a turning point of history. So, in turn, the language of our Rosh Hashanah prayers really is speaking to me very strongly this year, especially when we say, who shall live and who shall die, who dwells in peace and who is uprooted, who shall live safely and who shall be harmed, whose life is tranquil and whose is tormented. These may be familiar words to you. They're part of the Rosh Hashanah prayers. If they're not familiar now, they will be after today and tomorrow. Not only who is at peace and who is uprooted individually, but where are we collectively? We have learned in the past 18 months that with all of our scientific, technological, and medical achievements, we are still not exempt from the historical and global forces of epidemic and pandemic. In fact, because of globalization, we are very much susceptible to them. The possibilities of climate change, and not only the possibilities, but the current occurrences of heat waves and Arctic vortices, floods and droughts, hurricanes and wildfires, melting ice shields and rising sea levels, all contribute to the feeling that we are in the midst of some type of turning point in history. Who by fire and who by water, who by sword and who by beast, who by hunger and who by thirst, who by earthquake and who by plague. The world is witnessing the extinction of so many species of plants and animals that scientists are calling the current time a sixth period of mass extinction. The Anthropocene era is becoming the name of a new geological era. And in the realm of geopolitics, there is a big new kid on the block, an old kid actually, asserting itself in a new way. China has been intent for decades on replacing the United States as the world's leading power. And in recent years, China has developed technology that can destroy the satellites that give America such military dominance in the world, has drastically increased military pressure on Taiwan, which is a clear powder keg in geopolitics, has claimed vast stretches of international ocean as its own, has cornered the market on rare earth metals, which are of absolute necessity for building the electronic circuitry that so much of our life is based on, has built new missile silos, presumably armed with missiles aimed at the United States, has invested heavily in nations in strategic parts of the world in ways calculated to pull those nations into debt which those nations can not pay and can then satisfy only by handing over sites for strategic bases. The United States has been blinded by a sense of historical exceptionalism and has been ignoring the issue militarily, technologically, and economically. China is on the rise fast, and all three areas are connected. Who shall be poor and who shall be rich? Who shall be humbled and who shall be raised up? America's divisiveness at home has not helped. There's a powerful myth in America that when you leave everyone alone to fend for themselves, competing against each other, this in itself, by itself, releases the creative energy needed to sustain everyone in the society and move the entire society forward and upward. But more often what happens is it divides the rich against the poor. And as the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, the rich get more powerful and they use that power to keep the poor in their place. At that point, there really is no competition at all. In the political and economic sphere, the rich and powerful can use their power to make sure that the poor need to work 16 hours a day and still not be able to earn what they need to live. And they can eliminate protections meant to keep workplaces safe. And the powerful can create more and more obstacles to the ability of the poor to vote so that they even have less political power to counter what the rich are doing to them. Eventually, when the whole system collapses, as it almost did in 2008, the rich will be able to escape to the roof and the poor will be locked on the workshop floor as the building burns. In effect, we as a nation are reliving the forgotten conflicts that led to the establishment of Labor Day. Perhaps reliving these conflicts because they have been so much forgotten. In a similar way, it feels like America is relitigating the issues of race, civil rights, voting rights, reproductive rights, immigrations and refugees and exclusion. To some extent, it feels like America has reopened all the basic questions that seemed to have been settled over the past 200 years. The role of government in providing infrastructure. I thought that question was answered in 1806, when the federal government decided to build the national road from Cumberland to Ohio. The argument against it was that federal government has no role in infrastructure. America is reopening questions about the nature of democracy itself and whether the US Constitution itself can be used to implement a form of minority rule in America, using a combination of voter suppression, gerrymandering, and court rulings grounded in readings of the Constitution written as it was in 1789, a time when only propertied white males could vote, and the very concept of democracy as we understand it did not truly exist. To be sure, minority rule has existed in large parts of America for most of American history, given that Blacks legally were not even considered human in the South until 1865 and were denied the vote most of the time since then under Jim Crow, and that women could not vote anywhere in the country with but few exceptions until 1920. So minority rule has been the norm for America for most of its history. No one should make the mistake to think that it is legally impossible now. The world is a much smaller place than it was even 20 years ago when the events of 9/11 took place. It is much harder for us to remain disengaged from the rest of the world. So it seems that while conditions change, the questions a society asks so often do not. And as for those conditions that are changing, the trends that I am seeing, based not on crystal balls and tea leaves, but just looking at what is happening now, points towards much more violent weather, higher sea levels, temperature changes leading to disruption of food production, increased migration and resulting political disruption, less democracy in America and less democracy in the world. And I haven't even asked the questions of how all this impacts regional conflicts around the world and how it impacts the situation of the Jewish people, the rise of anti-Semitism and other forms of racism. Who by fire and who by water? Who shall wax rich and who shall sink into poverty? On the eve of Rosh Hashanah, we turn to an examination of the big picture of the world and the big picture of ourselves. The Torah and our Jewish tradition around the Torah have much to say about these issues, about the obligations of the powerful to the powerless, the obligations of the rich to the poor, and many other social issues. The sabbatical year, the 7th year in a 7-year cycle, is one ancient institution established in the Torah to address these issues. Conditions change. So how directly the specific prescriptions of the sabbatical year can be applied today is an ongoing question. But 5782, the year beginning tonight, is a sabbatical year. So these questions raised by Labor Day about the nature of a just society resonate through the centuries and through this year in particular. Who are we in this world that we are turning into? Each of us need to ask, who am I in the midst of all of this? Each of us brings our own gifts to the challenges of today. Each of us becomes our own answer to life's questions. In the next 2 days, as we recite the prayers from our tradition, we look at these challenges and at opportunities to be hopeful, opportunities that may be before us, but we need to search. As the new year begins, I wish everyone a Shana Tova, Lashana Tova Tikatevu. Even in light of all these, may you be written in the book of good life. May we all be written in the book of good life for the coming year. We have much to pray about. We continue with Kaddish. And that is page 1198. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kra'anu lavodato v'romamanu b'kedushatoho v'kidshanu mitzvotav. V'atitem lanu Adonai Eloheinu b'ahava et yom hazikaron hazeh yom truah mikra kodesh zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim. Ki aleinu karata v'otanu kidashta lavo hodatecha v'dvarcha emet v'kayam la'ad. Baruch atah Adonai melech kol haaretz Mekadesh Yisrael 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 V'yom hazikaron. Page 1200. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lahazman hazeh. Blessed are you, eternal one, our God, sovereign of all worlds, who gives us life, keeps us strong, and brings us to this time. Page 1201. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gdula liyotzeh breishit, shenatan lanu Torah hatemet, v'chaye olam nata betochenu, v'anachnu korim, mishacharim umodim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shehu Noteh Shamayim v'Yosed Haaretz, U'Moshev Yekaro b'Shamayim mima'al, U'Shchinatu zo, Begavhei Meheromim, Hu Eloheinu ein od, Emet Malkeinu efes zulato, Kakatov b'Torato, V'yadata hayom v'hashevota el levavecha, ki Adonai hu ha'Elohim, b'shamayim mima'al, v'al haaretz, mitachat ein od. Al ken nikaveh v'cha Adonai, page 1205. And so we put our hope in you, the eminence, our God, that soon we may behold the full splendor of your might and see idolatry vanish from the earth and all material gods be swept away and the power of your rule repair the world. As it is written in your Torah, the Eternal One will reign now and forever. Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, v'ne'emar, v'haya Adonai, le'melech al kol ha'aretz, v'yom ha'hu. Yom hahu yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. You be seated. Mourner's Kaddish, page 1215. In reciting the Kaddish, we affirm our awareness of holiness in our world. Much of our experience of divine goodness, grace, and love has come to us through those whose lives have touched our own. We invoke the transcendent power of love and caring as we sanctify God's name. Today, in particular, we are remembering the Yortzites of Elka Kranzel, the mother of Morris Kranzel, Sonia Hillman, the mother of Arnold Hillman, Ted Barbalo, the brother of Lillian Kranzel, Ray Rosenberg, the daughter of Rhoda Shore, Ethel Barish, the mother of Stan Barish, Rose Bell, the sister of Sonny Bowers, Melvin Rothstein, the brother of Arlen Rothstein, Phyllis John Paul, the sister of David Goldberg, Fanny Rosette, the mother of Honey Avis, Louis Weinshell, the husband of Sonny Bowers, and Norman Berg, the father of Steve Berg. And we continue to remember Sharon Ben, the sister-in-law of Eileen Kranzel, Mike Sokolow, the husband of Denny Serrata, Richard Blasberg, the uncle of Pam Eisenhower and the brother of Arlene Rose, Cheryl Ann Hillman Pelletier, sister of Arnold Hillman, Sanford Beckerman, the uncle of Ira Beckerman, Banye Geller, the cousin of Mort Rubenstein and CJ and Lisa Four, Dr. John C. Stoner Jr., the husband of Marilyn Kranzel Stoner, Alexander Chuchi, the nephew of Linda Reese and Ira Beckerman, Hedvig Newman, a former member of Temple Beth Shalom, Darlene Kranzel, the wife of Jack Kranzel, and Rose Eisenhower, the mother of Jim Eisenhower. Are there others?
Leontine Axelrod.
In memory of these and others who come before us, we rise. And on page 1216, we recite Yet Gadal V'Yet Kadash Shemei Rabbah V'Yamad Yivrach Roteh V'Yamlich Machoteh V'Chayechon V'Yomechon V'Chayed V'Chol Beit Yisrael V'Gala V'Zman Karev V'Imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Le'olam Ol Me'almaya Yitbarach V'Yishtabach V'Yitpa'ar V'Yitramam V'Yitnaseh V'Yitadar V'Yitaleh V'Yitalal Shemei D'Kudusha B'Richu Le'ela Le'ela Mikol Birchata V'Shirata Tush B'chata V'Nechamata Da'amiran B'Yama V'Imru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'Chaim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'Mroma Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Al Kol Yoshvei Tevel V'Imru Amen. And page 1218. Achat sha'alti me'et Adonai ohot ha'ahava kesh. Achat sha'alti me'et Adonai ohot ha'ahava kesh. Shifti beveit Adonai kol yemei hayai. Lachazot b'noam b'noam Adonai ulvahake b'echalon. Just a part of the psalm which is added to every service this time of year. We come to announcements. And we have several. Well, I found several, so why don't you? So first of all, Rosh Hashanah tomorrow.
10 o'clock?
10 o'clock tomorrow, and then 10 o'clock on
Wednesday.
On Wednesday. And for the rest, you can look on our website.
And on Sunday, we will be meeting at the cemetery at 1 o'clock to visit the graves and tell some stories about the people who are buried there, and then proceed to the Yellow Breeches. I presume it's back in its banks.
Oh, it could be. So 1 o'clock at the cemetery,
Correct.
and we go to every grave that's there and say something
We can do that.
about them.
Okay, and before that, at 9 o'clock in the morning, there's a board meeting.
Okay, and
That's all I can think of.
okay, I think that was it.
Thank you for coming.
And Shana Tova to all of those here and there. We conclude with Yigdal, page 1226. Or page 23 at the Jewish Home. Yigdal Elohim Chai ve'yishtabach nimtza v'yenet el mitziuto echad v'en yachid keyichudo ne'elam v'gam en sof le'achduto ein lo damut haguf v'eino guf lo na'aroch elav kedushato kadmon lechol davar asher nivra rishon v'en reshit le'reshito inno adon olam v'chol notzar yoreh gedulato u'malchuto shefa nevuato netano el anshe segulato v'tifarto lo kam be'Yisrael kemo she'od navi u'mahabit et temunato Torah temet natan le'amo el al yad nevi'o neman beito lo yachalifa el ve'lo yamir dato le'olamim le'zulato Sofe ve'yodea setarenu Mabit lesof davar bekadmato Gomer lehish chesed kemi fahalo Yiten lerashara kerishato Yishlach leketz yamin gehulato Liftot mechakeket Yeshuato Chaim mechalkel el beroch hasto Baruch adei Hashem tehilato Chaim mechalkel el beroch hasto Baruch adei Hashem tehilato. Shana Tova Tikatevu. May we all be inscribed in the book of life.